Thank you, Justin. Fantastic speech. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Michael Rowland. I'm the co-presenter of News Breakfast on the ABC, and I am the ABC journalist who drew the short straw today, sitting next to the boss and asking some questions. There will be about 15 minutes or so for questions. I'll toss it around to the floor in just a moment. I want to kick off, though, with a couple, Justin. The ABC chair, Kim Williams, recently made it clear in his own forthright way that he believes there's too much lifestyle content on our news website at the expense of hard news. Do you agree?
So Kim is one of the most experienced people in Australian media, with an incredible depth of experience over an amazing and storied career. We'd be foolish to not ever take on board his feedback, and we're fortunate to have him leading the organisation in that role. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the discussion and, in fact, the coverage around matters about the ABC are often oversimplified. And generally in Australian polity, I think we are at risk constantly of being fixated on polarities, that everything is an either-or. And I think I'd encourage us all to think and understand things and discuss things more, to have a more constructive debate about this or anything else, and imagine everything as duality. So in that case, I think, not to speak for Kim, he's been very, very clear and consistent that with the ABC News website, he wants to see on a day-to-day basis a clearer logic around what we are saying and deeming to be the matters of most substance and significance on a local, national, international level. And I agree with him that we can do a better job of that, and we're striving to do a better job of that. He's expressed his personal taste is more for hard news. He will get a lot of hard news on the website. The fact is, as I alluded to in my speech, what we all accept is that news has always been a combination of light and shade. And some of the best journalism is not hard news. Often it's bringing personal stories to light. Australian Story does an incredible job week after week, giving people a voice, whether well known or not, in terms of reflecting on their lives and bringing that to the nation. And so news can mean multiple things in terms of what we do. You know, News Breakfast each morning can pivot quickly from a really difficult, tragic story to a really funny, interesting, dynamic feature story, and that's what news has done across all platforms, and digital is no different. The key thing, and where we're completely singing from the same song sheet, is that we have to show clarity around the prioritisation of news. That's a robust debate that we will have, and all news teams have, and that's a healthy one to have.
I'm glad you raised the fact that the ABC, like every media organisation, makes mistakes, and importantly, we acknowledge those mistakes and seek to rectify them as quickly as possible. You mentioned the revelation on Spotlight on the weekend regarding a ABC story on Heston Russell. Let's not sugarcoat it. It was a bad mistake. An audio editing issue that did not involve the journalists involved in putting together that story, including Mark Willesee. I know you said you can't say too much about it, but I mean, the obvious question people would be asking, how could this possibly happen?
Well, that's exactly the question we're asking and we're pursuing, and we'll get to the bottom of. And we're not to the bottom of it yet, and we'll exhaustively look into it. And that's in everyone's interest, so that we can establish that, and at an appropriate time in coming days, once we have established that, in the way that I have expressed through our editorial standards, we'll be transparent with the public to explain that and put context and explain what occurred. So there's not a huge amount more to say until we run through that process. Okay, thanks, Justin. That's better. Okay, I'm going to toss it out to the room first. Please, questions, no speeches, no monologues, no polemics. The briefer the question, the more opportunity there'll be to ask questions. We want to try to squeeze in as many as possible. Justin wants to answer as many as possible. So,
thank you.
And also, could you please, say your name and any affiliation you have as well.
Thank you. Johan Lidberg, Monash University. Great on you for bringing back investigations regionally and locally. Couldn't be better. The question is, what's your plan B regarding Meta? So you mentioned CBC in Canada, and you mentioned that, you know, a huge audience on Insta. What happens if Meta does the same here as they do in Canada? What's plan B?
We've been prepping and putting in place lots of contingency plans. Thanks for the question.
So just move away from your face a bit. There's a happy medium about here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You've done this before. We've been coming up with contingencies for a long time. Hopefully Meta don't go down that path, because if they did, particularly in the context of a federal election around the corner, it would mean that mass misinformation and disinformation would proliferate on people's feeds. Meta claim that people aren't using news content on their platform, and I would contest that people are. People are regularly searching and absorbing news and information across Facebook, Instagram. Meta also own WhatsApp now, Facebook Messenger. People share information, they want to discuss it. That hasn't changed. They might be trying to deprioritise it being able to be found, but there's no shortage of people's interest in wanting to read that content. Interestingly though, whether it's Meta today, it might be another social media company tomorrow. And so all media businesses, including the ABC, have to be agile to just how unpredictable it is. And for instance, Reddit, what might surprise you is a huge number of Australians get their news and information, including about the ABC, on Reddit. So we're about to start a trial putting a staff member to properly facilitate news and information there, because a huge number of people access news and information on Reddit. If you look back to the role of Twitter, now X, 5-10 years ago, it was a preeminent platform for sharing news and information. Now it's a preeminent platform for toxic abuse and disinformation. So we have to balance ensuring that we're playing an active role in spaces that are safe for our staff, but also conducive and aligned to the values that we have.
Thanks, Johan. Sophie.
Justin, Sophie Ellsworth from The Australian.
Hi Sophie, thanks for your ongoing interest in the ABC.
Thank you, Justin. Following revelations, the ABC published doctored audio in the news report that was aired on Spotlight. Will yourself or Kim Williams be meeting with Heston Russell to discuss this? And why has it taken so long to remove this audio from the ABC? And will the ABC be apologising, given that Mr Anderson said at Senate estimates last year he would not apologise to Heston Russell?
Thanks for the question, Sophie. So, multiple questions. Let's try and tackle each one, and if I miss one, let me know. Firstly, will I meet with Heston Russell? He disclosed publicly that he'd sent a letter to the chair, Kim Williams, not to me, and I understand he's requested a meeting. I haven't seen that letter. I think Ben Fordham at 2GB has a copy of it, and others in the media do. I don't have a copy of it as yet. And I'm sure the chair will take consideration as to whether he will, and I won't speak for him as to whether he'll meet him. As I understand it, he's explicitly requested a meeting with Kim, not with me, and so I'll let the chair respond to him in due course. You used the word doctor, which is an extremely high allegation to make of any journalist, that a journalist would falsify information or audio for their own journalistic gain. As we have stated, there's no evidence to hand that either Joe Pacini, Mark Willesee or Josh Robertson had any role in the publishing of that online video, which we've taken down immediately. We are looking into it, and it shouldn't have occurred, and we removed it as soon as Spotlight brought the audio issues to our attention late last week. Did I miss any other questions? Well, I think we need to, in the first instance, where we need to exhaustively get to the bottom of what's happened. As I said, we will be upfront and transparent at the appropriate time in coming days as to what happened, and I'm not going to preempt that.
Thanks, Sophie. Okay.
Sue Elson, no affiliation. Would just be interested in your thoughts on why you think there's been an increase in the personal attacks on journalists, and if there's anything we can do to prevent that.
That's a good question. So I think two major things has happened. Firstly, everyone has a platform, and we've encouraged everyone to engage actively and proactively with news and information on those platforms, and that's a good thing. The second thing is, I think we, for whatever reason and due to a more polarised society, I've observed in different cohorts of people who have a political view, whether it's on the left or right, there's less toleration for hearing and respecting that people have different points of view. And that is a very concerning trend. I don't think that was the case, say, 10 years ago on Twitter. There was the ability for there to be more constructive debate and discussion, and at the end of that debate and discussion, accept that we can disagree respectfully. So I think that just because it's descended into a quagmire, the state of that discussion, particularly on social media, and the abuse levelled at individuals for doing their job, firstly, it's not going to stop us from doing our jobs. Secondly, I think it's really important that other media outlets are really particular about how they report on this and social media. And are other media outlets in the business of perennial targeted abuse of individual journalists for doing their jobs, which agitates the community and sends signals that they should be piled on for doing their jobs. And frankly, there are media outlets out there that are fixated on individual staff. They campaign against them, they bully them, they're trying to get them to not do their job. We won't be intimidated. We will defend our staff in the face of that. But I do think all of us and everyone in the media needs to think about how can we agree and disagree more respectfully. How do we make sure we don't pile into each other in the way Australian media do perennially at the moment? It's toxic and it reflects poorly on all of us to the Australian public.
Hi Justin, Callum Jaspin from The Age and The Herald. Sort of on the last question there, I was interested in your role as Director of News. How do you protect your journalists against attacks from the media and that finding a balance between standing up for them and ignoring it? And I guess in the spirit of transparency, are there any outlets that stand out for you?
What was the last question?
Are there any outlets that stand out to you in terms of the bullying of ABC journalists?
So if we went about defending every single staff member that was bullied or abused for doing their jobs, we'd be issuing multiple statements a day. And we can't. The second thing is, the ABC is an institution that belongs to the Australian public, and the public must come first, not ourselves. And so therefore, institutionally, we are not inclined to make the story about ourselves. The risk of that is that that being such an overt and important focus can mean that we have to always put the institution and the organisation ahead of anyone. And the cost of that can be at times people feel let down that we're not proactively going out there and defending them in the face of this relentless criticism. The second thing is there's a balance between calling out and defending it, but also ensuring we're not defined by it and that we're not reactive to it, because we have to just focus on doing the best job for the audience. I think really I have no immediate answers on how we stop the toxic pile-on. And I would add, it's not just ABC journalists, it's presenters, journalists from across the sector. And the research, as I said, is consistent that women, people of colour, culturally diverse people, First Nations journalists are unfairly targeted in the abuse they cop on social media. And so it's a real issue.
Down the back, yes.
Hi there, Justin. Rebecca Giles, Giles George. Thank you very much for your speech. I thought it was excellent. I just wanted to ask you about editorial standards, and in particular the new Code of Practice, which came into effect on the 1st of January. My reading of the document, it's a watered-down version of the previous document, and considering how important editorial standards are, I wondered if you could talk us through the rationale for that document, the consultation, and why it is in its current form.
Yeah, so thanks, Rebecca. And for those who don't know, Rebecca, does a formidable job representing a number of individuals in cases against the media, including, I would add, Heston Russell. The Code of Practice is a really important framework for staff to know and guide what they can and can't do in terms of the expectations that I expressed the values, the principles of the ABC that are ingrained in the ABC Act and the Charter around what we expect of ABC staff and what they can and can't do. I think obviously we're working in a more complicated environment these days in terms of the nature of the external environment, what people do for the ABC, the nature of potential external work, where we've got very formal processes for external work, whether someone's writing a book or taking part in some form of non-ABC event where there's clear policies around. We want to have a very consistent framework to make sure that staff understand what they can and can't do. The other thing is when the Code of Conduct was originally written, for instance, as you know, staff weren't on social media. And so there are different and new technological changes that mean that we have to adapt and make sure that the principles are relevant to the things that staff may take part in that never existed before. So happy to follow up with you if you need further information.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? We've got a few minutes left. By golly. Yes, over here.
Misha Ketchell from The Conversation. Do you think that the role of the Managing Director and the Editor-in-Chief should be separated?
I don't have a view, and I think David Anderson's been a really fantastic Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief. I see no reason to advocate a separation at this point. I think we have really clear policies around the editorial chain of command at the ABC around who's responsible for decisions and when decisions have to be escalated in different ways. So I don't see any grounds for advocating for that. I'm responsible for what we publish at ABC News. Clearly, we have a content division where Chris Oliver Taylor is responsible for anything content related that's published out of his area. Where we require advice, or if there's a threshold that needs to be elevated beyond that to the Editor-in-Chief, Managing Director, we do that. But frankly, we do that very rarely. And it's a pretty unique threshold that requires refer up beyond that, but clear policies around that too.
Lucky last. Callum, yes.
Just another one from me, Justin. Your budget each year is more and more strained while you have to, sort of stretch your presence across increasing platforms. You said a new investigations team at a state level. You're now moving into Reddit. How do you strike a balance between, commissioning what you want the ABC to cover? Now you've got to think about hard news, soft news, cross-platform, TikTok.
Yeah, so Callum, thanks for the question. As you may be aware, the ABC budget has reduced in real terms significantly due to government cuts over the last decade. And so in terms of what we're doing now in real terms and in terms of the content we're providing across multiple platforms, we're doing so on a smaller budget in real terms than the ABC's previously had, which is an amazing achievement. I think we're just trying to be clever and strategic in how we deploy our resources. We've got a $1 billion budget across the whole of the ABC. That's quite a significant amount of money, and we need to spend taxpayers' money well and effectively, and we need to point it in the direction that they most need it at any one time, and that will change and shift depending on their needs. The news budget's about $311 million, which would make it one of, if not the biggest news budget in the country. And so it's a significant amount of money to service all those networks and streams. We can't underestimate the benefits of technology and freeing up time for journalists. We're asking all staff across the news teams to focus on the value of content to make sure it's as high value as possible, no matter what they're doing, whether it's a local regional radio show or a state newsroom or an investigation, that we have to be very particular in our choices to make sure it's going to be a high value offering for the audience. And the reason for that is, in terms of the competing dynamics, the thing that will stand out and make us distinctive from anyone else is the distinctiveness and impact and value of our content to the audience. And so that might mean across the board people focusing or zeroing in on something rather than multiple things, and to be smart in how they go about that.
I want to wrap up with a question. You talk quite rightly a lot about the pressures and the stresses you face as ABC News Director, but going back over the last 2 years, Justin, can you nominate a particular time, a particular story that you really enjoyed, or a moment that you sat back and thought, gee, I'm proud to be the director of ABC News, other than watching News Breakfast every morning? Program stories other than that?
Thanks, Michael. I think it's been a thrilling 2 years. There's been a whole lot of really fascinating, big, unpredicted things that have occurred. I think this year I've enjoyed more than the previous two, and that's because I've seen so many fantastic initiatives come to fruition that a lot of our teams have put so much hard work into. To have an Indigenous Affairs reporting team where for the first time we had Bridget Brennan, Suzanne Dredge, Brooke Fryer, all First Nations and formidable journalists reporting at Four Corners. First time we've had that happen in the history of the 63 years of Four Corners. To see just the new website and app has been fantastic because a lot of hard work went into that, and we're confident it's going to be a better experience for the audience. So each week we look through at the stories we've broken week to week and we disseminate that to teams, and I think what really strikes me is how every team is really upping their game in terms of trying to break news and add value to the audience. I'll just wrap up by saying the favourite part of my job, as I alluded to in my speech, is going to regional teams and spending time on the ground there, because there's no noise, there's no extraneous sort of complex external noise. It's just a complete focus and clarity on serving their audience, and I think the more we all gravitate to that and have that absolute true focus, the better job we'll do.
Yeah, we have an awesome regional network. Justin, in wrapping up, I know I speak on behalf of each and every ABC journalist in this room by saying thank you for being such a fierce advocate for everything we do. And what people don't recognise is that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes support that Justin gives each and every journalist in this room who works for the ABC, be it a phone call, a text, a comforting hand on the shoulder in times of stress and pressure, and that, personally speaking, has been invaluable as well. So, Justin, thank you, and thank you for a wonderful speech and appearance at the Melbourne Press Club.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everyone for attending.